Welcome to WESB's Community Spotlight on B107.5.
This week, I speak with Jim LaValle. He is a clinical pharmacist and the author of Cracking the Metabolic Code, about how to keep our immune systems functioning in this stressful world. I'm Andy Paulson. This is Community Spotlight. Stay with me. Wintertime, we all hear complaints about colds and just generally feeling not so good. But how many of these symptoms that we think are just seasonal sicknesses are due to stress? My guest on the phone right now is James LaValle. He is a clinical pharmacist and the author of Cracking the Metabolic Code. Jim, thank you very much for joining me on Community Spotlight.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right. So exactly how does stress increase our chances of becoming sick? What are the main risks there?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is when you release the stress hormone cortisol, cortisol ends up especially chronic cortisol release. So I'm under chronic stress, emails, text messages, traffic, right? Lots of work responsibilities. That tends to weaken the response of what's called your T killer cells and your natural killer cells, the cells that are supposed to go out and fight the good fight when you get a cold or a flu bug. Now, the biggest thing I try to get across to people is that, how do I know? What are some signs that I may be under chronic stress? Because a lot of times people think, well, hey, I'm not anxious. I'm not stressed out, right?
I've never felt that, no.
Right? It's like if you have energy crashes during the day, like you got to have that cup of coffee at 1 o'clock or you're going down. Loss of focus, like feeling foggy-headed, that's a sign that chronic stress could be starting to have an impact on you. Trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. People don't realize, 60% of Americans will report having trouble with sleep. And and when you look up insomnia, it's called a disorder of hyperarousal, meaning your brain is pushing out too many stress hormones. And when you go to sleep at night, your brain is telling you, oh no, there's a white tiger. Don't go to sleep. You got to stay awake. That's basically what's happening.
I liken it that my body is stuck in the mud, but my brain is still going like 60.
Or 100.
Yeah, more like 100 nowadays, I think so.
Exactly it. No, that's exactly it. And a lot of people don't realize that over time, you're continuing to release those stress hormones. Now, that also causes your blood vessels to get stiffer. Your heart rate might go up, so your resting heart rate could be up. You could start seeing trends in your blood pressure going up. Craving of alcohol, like you hear it all the time. Oh, I got to have that glass of wine when I get home. Or it's that glass of wine becomes a goblet. And the goblet becomes, we just share a bottle each night. And then they don't realize that actually disturbs your sleep. Or how about I get home from work and the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking for that bag of tortilla chips or potato chips, and before you know it, I'm 2/3 of the way through it, or I'm at the bottom of the bag and I'm licking my finger to get the rest of the salt, right? That's, comfort food eating. And then also weight gain. So that's a big one too. People will start to gain weight when they're chronically stressed. Their blood sugars go up. They store fat better, so they learn how to store fat. Glucose goes up. And your lean mass goes down. And then also, the other one is that you might notice you're not recovering from exercise like you used to. Okay, I go and I exercise, and I actually feel worse after I exercise than better. And the reason it's important to look at this is that for so long we think that when you hear, hey, are you stressed? Once again, people go, well, no, I'm not stressed. I'm not anxious. I'm fine, right? It's like a badge of honor to not be stressed, right? But in reality, in my practice, and when I teach physicians all over the country, it's probably one of the number one things people report, that they feel overcommitted during the course of their day. They'll eat past being full in order to comfort them. They get midday crashes. They're having trouble with sleep. And so I think it's really important that people start to notice, well, how do I feel?
Now, we've discussed there or at least some, there are probably an infinite number of negative, self-destructive ways of dealing with stress. But the sad fact is that most of us can't avoid stress in our daily lives. What are some of the positive ways that we can counteract stress?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the big things I teach people to do is just 3 minutes twice a day, like at noon and say at the end of your workday, do box breathing. Box breathing is 4 seconds in, hold 4 seconds, exhale 4 seconds, thinking about releasing the stress of that period at that time that you've been in, and then you hold 4 seconds. You do that for 3 minutes. I mean, you got to figure, all the watches that are out there now. You got an Apple Watch is telling you to breathe, right? So you could just follow your watch nowadays, which is kind of funny, right? That a watch is saying, "Hey, time to breathe." I was like, "Well, what was I doing between those sessions?" Right? So that's important, is learning how to do a little bit of deep breathing, because that resets your nervous system. The other one is exercise. It doesn't have to be intense exercise. Like 20-minute walks 5 days a week can help, and then you can expand on that. Could be really important, And then, of course, what kind of sleep hygiene habits do you have? Are you turning off the blue light? Coming from your phone or from your TV? Are you doing anything to prepare you for sleep? Right? Those types of things are important. Some people take a hot bath, Epsom salt. Some people, put on a mask and start to darken their rooms. There's a lot of different methods that are out there, but I think it's important that you grab lifestyle and start to address that. So better sleep, get regular exercise, be active in resetting your nervous system, meaning I'm going to release the stress that I just, collected all morning right now at noon with this, 3 minutes of box breathing. Now, the other thing is that for a lot of people, blood pressure is one of the first things you'll see that will start to creep up on people, and there's actually some good nutrients people can take. It goes without saying, eating healthier is a smart way to go. That may have an indirect impact, right, on stress, because if you're not eating a bunch of sugar, you don't tend to trigger a lot of insulin and glucose release, which would then trigger a lot of cortisol release, which is a stress hormone. But things like aged garlic extract. Aged garlic extract, topic of 900 publications. UCLA, University of Florida, that shows that when you take aged garlic extract, you actually see the blood vessels relax better. People drop an average of 10 to 11 points on their systolic blood pressure and another 6 points on their diastolic blood pressure. So, things that help you to kind of overcome the metabolic effect of stress. One thing people don't realize is that when you're under chronic stress, you make more cholesterol. So the other thing aged garlic does is it helps you to not make the damaging cholesterol. So it's been shown to regress vulnerable plaque. The other thing that I like about it, just to give people a few things to think about, is that it helps with making those T killer cells more active. So you take aged garlic, it gets in your belly, and it makes something called gamma delta T killer cells, which are T killer cells that are ready to rock. Man, they're going to go out there and fight the good fight. And we got bad cold and flu season this year. A lot of people going down from it. And you have to realize the other piece to that is if you're only sleeping 5 hours a night, you're 9 times more likely to get a cold or flu than someone who's sleeping a restful 7 to 9 hours a night.
Well, we've got 5 generations of our Italian nanas behind us telling us that garlic is good for us, but it turns out that is the case.
Yeah, and you got it. And here's the thing: what's different? Eating garlic's great. Aged garlic extract actually is like they age it. It's made with organic garlic, but the compounds as it ages gets rid of the stinking rose effect. So if you take aged garlic extract, you don't get the scent. But that's the compound that's actually been studied to lower the blood pressure, lower the vulnerable plaque. It helps with the blood vessels to become more resilient. And so if people are out looking for the name of that, that's called Kyolic, Kyolic. I use it a ton in my practice. I got a lot of people that are under chronic stress. Their blood pressures are starting to go up. Not enough where they need medication, but you kind of want to get it under control early, right? I mean, that's what real prevention's about, is how can I do things, diet, lifestyle, nutrients that are well studied with evidence that can help me to manage this chronic effect of stress. So next year I'm not getting sick so much. right? Because the more you can keep that stress in balance, the least likely you are to kind of stress your immune system and kind of get you in a position where you're, not going to be able to fight the good fight when you get a bug.
Now, you recommend positive thinking, among other things, to try to keep inflammation levels low and keep your immune system healthy.
Well, positive thinking, it is amazing what happens when you start to incorporate positive thinking. You actually have a younger-looking immune system when you incorporate positive thinking. So, what it shows is, so there's a concept called aging. And inflammatory aging, and that comes from metabolic inflammation. And what they found is that people that think positive reduce their inflammation chemicals. Everybody understands cytokines now, since pandemic, right? They hear the term cytokine storm. So you keep those unfriendly cytokines dampened down, and it keeps your immune system at its optimal level. So positive thinking, although people, hear that and it's like, it's corny. I'm a glass half empty guy. Well, you're probably going to be pushing a harder response on your immune system versus someone who's thinking positively. And the biggest thing, look, at least for me, the last couple years where everybody's really turned their interest at is kind of this whole concept of longevity. And, longevity is all about that process of how do I control metabolic inflammation or metaflammation, which leads to inflam aging or inflammatory aging. And, stress is chronic stress is one of the biggest things that throws your chemistry off, tilts that immune system out of balance, and then leads to inflammatory chemistry that starts to damage your tissues.
Now, with a lot of health problems, we have ways to test. I can take my little pogo device, have it prick my finger and test my blood sugar to see if I'm too high or too low. I can go sit in the little chair with the cuff at CVS and have it test my blood pressure. Is there a way that we can test our stress levels?
Well, there isn't. I wouldn't say there's a direct way to measure your stress. You can measure your cortisol. So I measure cortisol on people, both a morning cortisol in blood, and then also you can do a urinary or salivary cortisol where you map out how is your cortisol doing during the course of the day. So it should go up high in the morning, drop at noon, drop again at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and then drop down to almost nothing at bedtime. And when the cortisol drops to nothing at bedtime, that's the signal that your brain gets to release melatonin so that you can go to sleep. So you can measure cortisol. You can look at blood pressure and heart rate because stress is correlated to, the higher the heart rate, the more the adrenaline's going in your body. So, those are some basic things, heart rate, and look at your blood pressure morning and night. So because a lot of people don't realize, at night you're supposed to be calming down, not ramping up. So your blood pressure actually should be lower at night, higher, like if you take it, a couple hours after you wake up. And if you don't, that's called a non-dipper. You got to keep the stress hormones rocking all day long, right? And that keeps the blood vessels stiff. That keeps the cortisol, like you said, stuck in the mud and trying to go 100 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And that's going to keep your brain alert, and that's going to make your heart rate get stuck eventually, where your heart rate starts going up. And heart rate's a big predictor for cardiovascular disease risk, because in the end, the number one thing killing everybody still today, it's heart disease. So why wouldn't you want to? And the number one correlated, factor for causing it isn't smoking, not even blood sugar, even though a lot of people with diabetes end up with heart disease. It's called autonomic nervous system dysfunction, meaning your nervous system got jumbled up from too much stress, and that started to create this whole cascade of problems with your blood vessels. That's why that Kyolic I was telling you about, I've used that for 20 years. I've seen people over and over again get their heart rates down, their blood pressures get better, their lipids look better, and they look great. Great human trials behind it. I mean, shoot, it's it's when you got university studies showing that this stuff works, it's pretty impressive.
Now, you've got your book, Cracking the Metabolic Code. I imagine it's available from all the usual suspects.
Yes, it is. And people can check out, jimlavalle.com. I've got all 24 of my books and ebooks listed there, so I've written quite a bit. And also, I'm the editor-in-chief at probiotics.com if people are interested in learning about, the benefits of the microbiome and what you can do.
And if you want to check out his website, the last name is spelled LaValle. Make sure you spell it right. Jim LaValle, clinical pharmacist and author of Cracking the Metabolic Code. Thank you very much for joining me on Community Spotlight today, and let's try to de-stress a little.
There we go. Thanks for having me.
Next week, if you've waited until the last minute to do so, we're going to give you a little bit of a hand with your Super Bowl party planning. I'm Andy Paulson. Thanks for listening to Community Spotlight from WESB News.